In the previous episode of this series, we made our own Rasa container by making our own Docker file. Inside of this file, we were training our own model, and we really built everything from scratch. Given this Docker file, what we could do is we could build our own container. We could give it this name over here using this build command. And once this container was built, we could run it. And we would run it with a command like this. We would indicate that this is the container that we were interested in, and because we already built it before, we were able to run it. What I'm going to explore in this video, though, is not to build our own container over here, but to instead refer to a pre-built container that Rasa has made on your behalf. The containers in question that I'll be talking about are hosted on Docker Hub, and you can find them on the official Rasa repository on Docker Hub. You'll find a container for Rasa X, and you'll also find this container for Rasa, and it's this container that we will be using in this video. If you want to know more information, you can go to the specific repository, but this will be the container that we'll be using for now. So let's fetch this container and run it. To get the container running locally, we can manually fetch the container, but what you can also do is just replace the name here. Whenever you run a container that's not locally available, Docker will download it for you automatically. So from the Rasa repository, we would like to have the Rasa container. When I run this, you'll see the message that indeed it's not able to find this container locally, so it's going to download it first on our behalf. And here's what we see when the container is done downloading and when it ran itself. Let's make the terminal a little bit bigger so we can see. It seems like when we run the container, we are running the base Rasa shell setting. Now the reason for this is that inside of the official Rasa container, there is the Rasa entry point specified, but there is no command declared. So if I wanted to actually run the Rasa server here, I would have to call run and enable API. However, when I run this, I think we're going to get an error. Let's see the error, and then let's explain why we get it. When we run this, we get a pretty substantial warning over here. It's telling us that right now there are no models inside of this container, and therefore we can't really do much. To explain what's happening here, it helps to explain a big difference between what the Rasa container is doing and what we did in the previous video. In the previous video, part of building the container was training a NLU model. The general Rasa container needs to be general, so it cannot be very specific to a particular dataset. That is why the Rasa container assumes that you have a model already trained. And the thing that you got to do is get that trained model inside the Rasa container before you can actually run this Rasa container as a service. To do this, we have to do one extra thing, and that is that we have to make this container aware of the file system that's over here. The container needs to be able to access this file system from inside of the container. So when we run the docker run command, we have to attach a volume, so to say, which is a part of the file system that we're interested in sharing. So let's set that up. Let's first exit this container by hitting Control-C. And let's now attach a volume to this command. I can specify the volume with -v. Now I can pass in my volume settings. And what I'll be saying is, well, take my current working directory and let's link that up with this app folder that's inside of my container. When I do this, the container will have access to everything that's on my current path, which would include any models that are in this folder. A final thing that I'll do now is I'll set the port as well, because we will be sharing port 8080 over here, so I gotta make sure that Rasa is using port 8080 as well. We still see some warnings, but definitely this warning, the one that says that models couldn't be loaded, that one is now gone. And we see this message that the Rasa server is up and running. So let's confirm that everything works by making a request. Again, I'm on localhost 8080, and I'll be going to the model parse endpoint, and when I hit send, we get a response back. And if I change the text, the prediction also changes. We just ran a Rasa container locally, and that's interesting, but it's good to make a distinction between all of these different containers, because you might be wondering, well, we just ran a Rasa container, but what Rasa version were we running? And also, what about our optional dependencies? Do we have access to Spacey or Hugging Face with the language model featureizer? To answer some of those questions, it helps to check out what lies under this tags button on Docker Hub. When you go here, you'll see all the different versions of this Rasa container that are deployed. There's the latest container with the latest and greatest version, but we also have a container that's called 2.8.2 full. There's also one called 2.8.2 MITI English. And if you scroll down, you'll also see similar things for Spacey. And the further down you scroll, the older some of the versions will get. We now see 2.8.1, and if I scroll down a whole bunch, then we see that there are all these different pages, and when we go back quite a bit, we see that there's also containers for Rasa 2.3.2. What's good to point out here is that Rasa containers do appear in different shapes and sizes, but also in different versions, and there is a convention. A Rasa container starts with Rasa / to indicate that we are using the Rasa Docker Hub repository. In this case, it's then followed up by Rasa, and then colon, the tag that indicates the version number. So we could explicitly say, hey, let's run a new Rasa model using version 2.8.0, just to be explicit. And let's then also say that we're interested in running the Spacey English container, let's say. This will be a container that has a medium English model inside of it, which could cover your use case. But if you want to be very flexible, I recommend that you always use the -full container, because that will be the container that has all the optional dependencies already installed. So just to demonstrate that we can also run these other containers that I just mentioned, let's change the name of the container over here just to show that we can also pull something else in. Now, I will need to pay a little bit of attention. I have a fairly recent version of Rasa locally, which means that this model is also from a fairly recent version of Rasa. So I will need to pick a version of Rasa here, at least, that's compatible with the model that I have locally. So at the time of writing this video, I think the version is 2.8.1. And I'll just say, hey, please give me the container that has all the optional dependencies. And again, it first has to download the container, which will take a while. But once this is done, we should be able to confirm that we now have a very specific version of Rasa running. And there we are. The Rasa server is now up and running. And what I'll do now is I'll double check the API again to confirm that we are actually running this version of Rasa. Now, the first thing that I'll just do is I'll just do the hello command with the text first, just to confirm that the model is indeed functional. And that seems to be the case. We have our greeting. But what I can also do is check the version. That is also something that we expose in the API. And when I do that, I can confirm that the current version that's running inside the container is 2.8.1, and it even tells me the minimum compatible version for the models as well. But this confirms that indeed we can control the version of Rasa that we're running by specifying the name and tag of the container that's given to you by Rasa. So what have we done in this video? Well, in the previous video, we showed that you can use Docker to containerize applications, which makes them easier to ship, and we built a custom container using Rasa. But now we've also shown that Rasa comes with a couple of pre-built containers that might be very useful for you to use. That said, there might still be a need for you to build your own container. If you're doing something that's very, very custom, say you're using very specific Python libraries that Rasa doesn't natively ship, then you may want to still build your own custom Docker containers. But if you're getting started with Rasa, I recommend using the Rasa containers just to get started with, mainly because it comes pre-configured with lots of good practices. At the same time, I'm also hoping that you recognize that there's something else we got to do on this path. It's great to have a Rasa container that has all of our models in such a way that we can do our natural language processing for requests that come in. But if we're going to be hosting a virtual assistant, we definitely need more. We will need a database to track all of our conversations. And preferably, we would also have the option of scaling Rasa. It might be the case that we need more than one of these model servers to handle all the traffic that's coming in. And that might also mean that we need some sort of a load balancer or a proxy like Nginx that can properly route all of this traffic. The part that Docker is solving for us here is the fact that we can bundle code together in order for it to represent a service. But it doesn't necessarily allow us to orchestrate all of these different services. That's another problem. The tool that we're going to use for that is called Kubernetes. And in the next video, I'm going to explain why Rasa has chosen Kubernetes to be its preferred platform for deployment.